We've all heard of skin whitening, whether it be bleaching, IV drips, yes, that is a thing, or just creams and serums. But what you might not know is that some of your favorite drugstore brands are the ones behind those products. Hi, I'm Katrin, and thanks for joining me on today's video where we're going to be talking about skin whitening products being pushed overseas. Now, maybe you're surprised to hear that brands are selling these products and that you didn't know about it, or frankly, maybe you're just not that surprised anymore. But the reason you don't know is probably just because you don't live where these products are being sold and marketed. But regardless of that, don't be fooled because the market for skin whitening is huge. According to Future Market Insights, the Asia Pacific market is especially very profitable. They come in at just over half of the market at $7.5 billion of a global market totaling $13.3 billion. And that was just in 2017. So it has only just grown immensely since then. And if there were any doubts in your mind as to why brands would want to sell these products in the first place, well, I think that the overall profit gain makes it pretty clear. The problem is that these brands have been and are continuing to try to do their best to hide their participation in the skin whitening market as much as possible. And these are not small brands, okay? These are very well-known established drugstore brands like L'Oreal, Unilever, and Nivea. Although a lot of the brands selling these products have made statements expressing that they had desires to get rid of this kind of messaging around skin whitening and also products that generally just promote it, they haven't been doing a super good job of holding up their end of the bargain. For example, Nivea's owner made some statements expressing that they would be making these changes and be eliminating the words fair and white from their brand. However, this did not really hold true. They even went so far as to say that they would be eliminating their communications that, quote, do not embrace the complexions of our diverse consumer base, end quote. Now, if you were to hop online and let's say look at their USA website, you would probably think that they've held up this promise, but they really haven't, because if you look at their other websites, let's say the Philippines website, for example, it is very easy to see that they still sell these products. All of these products and more were very easy to find on their website, and they all feature words such as white and fair. Some other brands who have made very similar promises include Johnson & Johnson and L'Oreal, and they've really assured customers that they would be making these changes. And from what I can tell, Johnson & Johnson actually seems like they've been upholding this promise, which I say reluctantly because honestly, how will you ever really know unless you can access all the marketing in the world? But from what I can tell, it does seem like they have either stopped selling these products or have done a very good job of making it look like they don't sell these products anymore. Hopefully it's the first one. L'Oreal, on the other hand, has not done a super good job of upholding their promise. At least immediately they didn't. After L'Oreal made these statements saying that they would eliminate these products, people went online and found that they really hadn't changed anything. But more recently, it seems like they have taken away those products. So it seems like they've now upheld their promise. It just took them a couple tries. Now, although we've looked at a couple examples of brands that seem like they are upholding their promises, I just want to make it clear that I think all of these public statements and promises to their consumer bases should really be taken with a grain of salt. And I don't say that to instill even a sense of distrust in these brands. I wish that we could take people for their word more, but there is just so much evidence that brands don't do what they say they're going to do. One thing I want to point out here is that there is just only so much marketing we can access, especially if you live in the United States, a place where you're not seeing a lot of these products being sold and marketed to you. And brands know this, especially when we live in a world where we would like to think that information is readily accessible and we would know if these products even existed. But we don't. We don't know. We have no way of knowing if these brands are selling these products through things like local billboards and local advertisements. We literally have no idea. So I just want to throw that out there that you really need to be cautious in trusting these brands when they make such strong promises. Unilever in particular has heavily contributed as to why I feel this way and why I think we need to be cautious as consumers. So in mid 2020, Unilever decided to rebrand a brand it had called Fair and Lovely, which is primarily sold throughout South Asia. Now, the reason they decided to do some rebranding is because, as one could imagine, consumers started to really get a distaste for the name of this product. There were a lot of people complaining online. There were so many online petitions going around asking them to change this name, and they did. They listened after lots of pressure. So they went from being fair and lovely to glow and lovely. And at first glance, you might think, oh man, that was a good idea. That was a good change. But here's the before and here's the after. Do you notice anything just a little problematic about this packaging? I find this so frustrating because it prefaces before saying just glow and lovely on the packaging. It says fair and lovely, now glow and lovely. I can understand from a marketing standpoint why a company might want to list the previous name of the product on the packaging to help their consumers transition to this new product and assure them that it is the same product. But this happened over 2 years ago, and the packaging still looks like this. Like, there's absolutely no reason why it still needs to look like that. And if the previous name, which is what was the problem in the first place, is still the first thing you see on the packaging or on the packaging at all, to me, that doesn't really say that the brand changed. Let's dive into why skin whitening really is a problem. Well, a lot of it goes to colorism. I think that the following quote from a 2016 research article does a really great job of explaining why colorism is such a motivator for skin whitening in the first place, especially for people like me who haven't ever experienced it. It says, quote, "In most communities across the globe, fairness is branded as beauty, grace, and high social status. This perception encourages most women to engage in skin bleaching." End quote. Now, in researching this topic, I discussed a lot of this with my husband, who has lived in the Philippines and has been able to witness colorism firsthand. And he basically emphasized to me that skin color there really is a signifier of your social class. So essentially, the more white you are means that you can afford a kind of lifestyle where you can be inside all day. Whereas if you have a darker complexion, then this means that you're probably working outside. This, aka colorism, is exactly what brands are preying on to make a profit. In the article, The Skin Whitening Regime, How Colorism in Filipino Media Has Led to Discrimination and Shame, Jen LaFortenza discusses her upbringing in the Philippines and the presence of skin whitening products today. She also discusses more on the colonial history that the Philippines has, which heavily has influenced, the build of colorism and skin whitening products today, which is not really something I'll be covering today. But if you're interested in learning about more of their history, she talks about it in her article, which I highly recommend. She says, quote, "Skin lightening products are alarmingly easy to come by in the Philippines. They're accessible in virtually every supermarket and anywhere else where cosmetics are sold. Their TV advertisements often feature half Filipino, half white models and light-skinned Filipino actresses." Brands such as Pond's, owned by Unilever, are painfully aware of this, and they utilize this tactic in their advertising. There are many examples of this, but for today we're just going to be discussing this ad put out by Pond's that features many very beautiful, well-known Filipino women. The narration over this ad goes as follows. "The Philippines' most beautiful faces share one secret. Now you too can reveal your rosy white glow with Pond's White Beauty Cream." So I'm really not here to bash on these women. I'm just here to talk about the fact that we all know that this product is not how they got the color of their skin. And that's what the problem here is that these brands are misleading and they're creating a false perception of not only what beauty is, but how we get this look that some might consider more beautiful. I think that we can all imagine, for many reasons, why this is a really harmful idea to instill in people, women especially. And I found this messaging especially disheartening to hear from Pond's because if you look on their Philippines website, they really post a beauty is for all narrative. And clearly, this motto is just not upheld in their other media. Now, as long as the demand for skin whitening products continues, the supply is not going to stop. Now, I think it's important to remember here that not everyone can afford mainstream drugstore brands. The mere existence of these brands and their skin whitening products creates an environment where cheaper alternatives are bound to thrive. And this is so problematic for so many reasons. These cheaper alternatives often contain really harmful substances such as mercury and hydroquinone, which are not good for you at all, and especially not good for you in high doses, which many of these products do contain alarmingly high doses. The distribution of these products is difficult to just put an end to. Even in places like Korea, where there are really heavy ingredient bans, this doesn't stop imports of these products from happening because people are still going to order them online. Not to mention, in places like Mexico, the Philippines, and many other places, ingredients lists are often nowhere to be found on the packaging. So even the most educated consumer would have no way of knowing what they're putting onto their skin. The effects of using products that contain mercury and hydroquinone include things like depigmentation, reduced resistance of bacterial and fungal infections, nerve damage, liver damage, anxiety, depression, abnormalities in newborns, and the list just goes on and on. Though I think it's easy to get very disheartened talking about this topic, I just want you to know that this is not a problem where there is no hope. As we've already discussed, there is clear evidence of skin whitening fatigue from consumers, and this is being reflected in the decisions that brands are making. For example, as noted in an article by KQED by Ray Alexandra, she says, Shoddy, a dating site popular with the Indian diaspora, removed a feature that asked its users to specify the lightness of their skin tone. Using descriptors including fair, wheatish, and dark, the decision was made just 2 weeks after a petition was set up demanding the change. And it's not just consumers who are speaking out about these issues. It's other people who really have a say in the company. For example, model Monroe Bergdorf responded to a post from L'Oreal that was posted during the Black Lives Matter movement, a time when a lot of brands decided to make some changes, and she had claimed that L'Oreal, quote, dropped me from a campaign and threw me to the wolves for speaking out about racism and white supremacy, end quote. Of course, after this went public, it sparked a lot of outrage online, but it had a relatively good outcome, I would say, because she actually ended up being hired back on by L'Oreal as part of their UK Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Board. Now, although the situation really is looking hopeful, I think it's important to remind ourselves that the problem we're seeing is not the same across the board, which means the rate at which it improves and how it improves isn't going to be the same either. Lastly, I want to leave everyone with some great practical advice from Jen LaFortenza, who says, quote, there are some worthwhile actions we can do that involve not just individual change, but also a collective conscious effort so that others can feel comfortable in their skin color. This can look like not commenting on someone's skin color, suggesting to someone who does that it's not right to do so, avoiding supporting companies that profit from skin whitening, and actively resisting influences that try to convince you to like whiter skin more, no matter where it comes from, end quote. With that, I really hope that you were all able to learn a little bit or take something from today's video, and thank you so much for joining me. Can't wait to see you next time. Bye, guys!